And hello, everyone, and welcome to One Take because life has no rehearsal. Today, I am absolutely thrilled to introduce Jeff Zbar. I hope I'm pronouncing it more or less right, Zbar.
I love it. Perfect.
And Jeff has one thing that you will not believe. Jeff invented the home office in 19 what, like 89 or something like that.
89. Yeah.
Yeah, Jeff left corporate America, set up a home office, became the chief home officer, and basically created the industry. He wrote books about it. He was quoted about it. Companies came to him. So Jeff has done many, many, many things. Written books. He coaches. But the main thing in my mind, Jeff invented the home office. So here we are with the chief home officer, and Jeff, welcome. Thank you for joining us. It's a real pleasure.
Thank you,
So,
Marcelo. It's great to be with you, and I appreciate the love. You want to do my PR? No, just kidding. So it's great. I appreciate it. I appreciate it. And I got to say that when I first started, when I was as a freelance journalist, which was the first leg of my career, and we'll get into it. I remember the day we met. We were down, it was some event down in Brickell, somebody or along Brickell, and somebody was introducing some sort of campaign, and I was a writer for Ad Age, and you were sitting behind me or beside me, and you just leaned over and introduced yourself. And that stuck with me for whatever reason, just I really appreciated it. And it's a friendship that's carried forth. That had to be in 92, something like that, maybe 93.
like
It's
that, yeah.
it's way back.
Yeah, way
It's
back.
pretty
I mean, like,
remarkable.
it's forever. But so we've all been through like a ton of stuff. By the time we get to be our age, we have scars all over the place, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But we were just talking about my decisive moment, how I just made a decision that affected all of my life after that. Let's talk decisive moments. What was the decisive moment that created the modern Jeff Zbar?
Yeah, I think I ask that of CEOs when I interview CEOs often, what was the one? And it's often it's a continuum of things. It's, how did you get where you are? I mean, I worked for a small weekly publication in Miami. It was my first job out of journalism school, and I was there for about 2 years. But there was a woman who was there, who was at the time, she was a stringer. She worked for the Miami Herald, and she was a stringer for Advertising Age magazine. And I got to know her. She got to see my chops. And I was just a young cub reporter. I was 23, 24. So, I was still very young and new to the industry. But at the same time, I was working for somebody who I had been working for an editor he was South African born, raised in Israel, and really had a good touch and feel for the English language. What did Churchill say? The Brits and the Americans are common people, or people separated by a common language.
Yes,
Um,
I love that.
and exactly. And so I learned a lot from him. And then somebody came in after the fact, and I said, "Yeah, well, I'm not quite learning anything anymore." And meanwhile, I was newly married. I was married at, I think, 24, and my wife was the daughter of entrepreneurs. Her mother and father, her father built ice rinks up in Toronto. So she had in her the understanding of what it meant to be an entrepreneur. So I came to her one day. Again, I was maybe 24, 25, something like that. And I said, I want to quit and go freelance. And I'd been doing some freelancing on the side. So I got bitten by the bug. South Florida Magazine, I wrote a couple nice profiles for them and were really well received. She said, do it. And I gave notice and went freelance again, it would have been 89. I gave notice in 88, 89. I went, by January, I was on my own. So there are these decisive moments that come along. So I mentioned the person from the Herald, for example, who was a connection that when I went freelance, my previous employer was my first client because they still needed a writer. So I did that work. But then she said, hey, do you want to cover, I write for Ad Age magazine. I got to give up. It was to cover the local South Florida market. And she said, do you want to take over Broward County? Because there were about 4 or 5 agencies in Broward that were not big, but significant enough to need some love on a national level occasionally. And I
I
said,
thought it was
sure. And I did.
huge. Harrison
Well,
Media.
Zimmerman now is, yeah, Zimmerman is the 14th largest in the nation, or whatever the number is now. They got bought up by Omnicom, and there was Harris Drury Cohen, if you remember Stan Harris and John Drury.
They were my partners. They were physically my partners. Well, John Drury I just saw last year at the
Yeah.
Dutch convention. It was
I've seen his photos. I've seen his photos from the convention. It's pretty
yeah.
remarkable stuff.
Those guys were not the agency. They themselves were my partners.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. And that's what they had. And then eventually a year into that, just being a stringer for Ad Age, and moved back, I think, to Peru or something like the person I'm speaking of. She moved back to Peru and gave up Florida. And Florida had a lot going on at the time. So, and I don't want to dive too deep, but we had the cruise industry. We had Wayne Huizenga and Blockbuster Entertainment that was going to become a colossus. It was on its way. Eventually, we had, Disney Cruise Lines launched, and Carnival Cruise Line was explode. This is at the time when the cruise industry had gone from just a small thing that only certain people took to running, national and international brands that really took off. So you had Carnival, you had Royal Caribbean, you had Norwegian, things like that. And so I was just the right place at the right time, and I took over that. So back to my point that you have this continuum of events that set you up for future success. I mean, assuming you grab them, assuming you know to take advantage. Had I said no to Anne when she said, "Do you want to be a stringer for Ad Age?" That could have been, pop that balloon and go find something else, And then there was one more that led from that, because I was writing for Ad Age. The Fort Lauderdale Sun Sentinel this is a time when every major metro daily had a Monday insert. So Miami had Monday Business, I think it was, and the Sun Sentinel had Your Business, and they had columns. And one of the columns they had at the Sun Sentinel was marketing. It was marketing and advertising, and so their person moved on to take a job with Adweek. And so someone came to me, someone just out of the blue, who I knew from the ad business, said, "Jeff, you should put your name in the hat for that position." I did. It was funny. Again, I'm working from home. I did a couple mock columns for them. Great people to work for, I would come to learn. Did a couple of mock columns, didn't hear back for a couple of weeks, as is always the case. And I'm taking a nap on like a Friday afternoon at like 2 o'clock, and I get a phone call on the landline. We don't have a business line. There's no cell phone. "Hey, Jeff, you want the position? It's yours." We talked numbers. "Yeah, great." Hung up the phone, went back to sleep, continued my nap. But it all spawned stuff from there. And so these decisive moments, come and they come as, again, not to belabor the point, but these continuums of opportunities that if you seize one, you may open another door. And it really has been that way. And it's been remarkable. And you just have to be open to it. My dad was he was a physician, but he was an entrepreneur-minded physician. My wife's parents were. You have the mindset, you can make things happen. And it's fun to see it, especially as you and I, old gray and grizzled, look back on the opportunities that came our way. They were there because we took the opportunity to jump when it presented itself.
Well, yeah, no, and that takes me to a second point because, as always, these decisive moments are also mixed with, like huge radical changes in the market,
Yeah. Yeah.
like the cruise industry. But like I'm very much focused also on the pan regional
Yeah.
scene, which in those days was booming, and today, of course, it doesn't exist. So, talking about things that don't exist anymore, what changes? Because you've been in the middle of change.
Yeah.
You recorded the change. You chronicled it. So, what change overall strikes you as, boy, I would have never thought that would happen?
Well, I mean, the easy one, and I want to start at the beginning, but I will just mention the easy one. We were talking about it earlier. AI, Chat GPT, and LLM
Too easy.
is it's crazy. And I got to tell you, Marcelo, if I were 20 years younger, I'd be scared. Okay, I'm 60. I'm in I don't want to say the twilight. I'm certainly in the back nine of my career, as to use golfing parlance here. I don't fear Chat GPT or LLM, just any of that. At a certain point, your career becomes the relationships. And it should be from the beginning, but you're not there from the beginning. It should be the relationships you have and the trust that people place in you. So people always hired me because they liked my voice, meaning not my audible voice, but the way I wrote and the tone I used. And so I've done that with ChatGPT. I've had it write. I've given it a prompt like write a story from the voice of Hunter S. Thompson about camping for your first time. Because I do a lot of camping and music festivals and things like that. I said the same thing for Nabokov. I said write one from the voice of Nabokov. Yeah, they can do it, but is it really there? So my point being, and as I said, I'm fast forwarding, but I don't fear it now. But if I were fresh out of J school, journalism school, English, looking for a job writing, it would be tough. But I think the biggest unexpected change that came along, and I think for any freelancer, there's nothing that was colossal across the market that really changed. There were a lot of positive changes. The growth of, when I first started writing, I had to fax my copy to my editors in Chicago for Ad Age. I would fax it to them. If they were local, I would mail it to them or drive it to them. I mean, now, boop, enter, it's gone and it's there seconds later. So the arrival of like AOL was my first account. I mean, we're talking back there. We're talking before Al Gore invented the internet. Wink. But a lot has happened that again, these events along the way. But I would think the biggest changes that happened to me was the loss of any big client. Like Ad Age was a huge client for a while, and they just at one point stopped. And that's fine. Sun Sentinel was a huge client for a while, and they eventually they got acquired by a company out of Chicago and started paring down. So I think that as anyone who's a freelancer or an entrepreneur knows that the biggest thing that happens along the way is loss of a significant client. And then that speaks to your resiliency and how you cope. And I know that's another topic you wanted to explore, but it's
But
just the ability to handle it.
let's stop there for a moment because I remember when Ad Week was Ad Week, Media Week, and Brand Week.
Yeah.
And I remember speaking one day with one of the editors or somebody high up and saying it's the most useless shit because it's the same content essentially with like four different pages. And why would I have to pay $149 a year per issue? And then like a year later, it all becomes Ad Week. Ad Age also went down a lot
Yeah.
from, like a really robust magazine. Actually, very robust. I mean, like I remember that thing arriving every week and it was thick.
It
And
was
it had
thick.
all sorts
Yeah.
of special sections. It died. Business Monday absolutely died. Actually, Jane is my neighbor. She lives
Yeah.
about three houses from me. And
Yeah.
one day she was telling me, "Oh, I know you hate the Herald," and I don't hate the Herald. I sort of despise it. They didn't move up to the challenge of it.
Yeah.
So, how did that strike you overall? Like how do you see this publishing industry and especially the trade industry?
It's sad, and I'm glad you brought that up. I mean, I think the one thing that the Herald did right is they bought Herald.com. When dot coms were available, they owned Herald.com. So not, and they probably owned Miami Herald as well, but they owned Herald.com. At the time, it would have been like almost like buying, beer.com, which traded for like $185 million 15 years ago, something like that. But they all got lost. Not they, it was, who was it who said it's the vision thing? That so many of them got lost in what was going on. Now, no fault of their own, you had blogging arrive and you had social media arrive and you had everyone and their brother stand out as some sort of expert on a topic. So it really got parsed so that, I may be the Miami Herald, but what about this guy who I know somebody who is, I forgot he's like a junkie for the Dolphins. Like and he writes about it and posts about it more than any beat writer can really cover because it's all he does. So it, it it caught them flat-footed. And I remember I was at a meeting not a meeting, but a party where a former publisher of the Herald, and names won't be mentioned here, but a former publisher of the Herald was there. And I said, I let my subscription go because there's just nothing you're giving me that I can't get elsewhere. I subscribe now, and I subscribe to some aggregation services where I get the Herald and I get others and I get, all the major national publications as well. And he says, you're what went wrong with daily news. Really? Blame it on me?
Yeah,
You're
it's
not.
your fault. Blame the
Yeah, you're
victim.
giving. Exactly. I mean, if you're not giving me the content I want, then don't blame me. Maybe you guys missed the boat. Maybe there's something you can learn from it. And I think that that's where, to your point, media changed dramatically. But it's how you I became a blogger. I was writing for major weeklies like Ad Age, and I was writing for, Metro dailies like the Sun Sentinel. And I was all freelance, but I would do occasional writing for them. But the some of those publications just lost their way because there were others that got into their niche and could grab onto it. Now we've seen it. I don't want to say settle out a bit because it still is dynamic. It's problematic also because you do have people out there who purport to be experts in what they do and what they write and what they cover, and we become ferrets. We're like, as I say, ferrets on speed, just looking for the next, or a squirrel looking for the next shiny thing, and have a hard time sort of latching on to where the truth lies. And that's led us astray as a nation, as society, in some ways. But you find what, for me, and that also led me to do more corporate copy. So corporate copy pays better than most journalism work that I do, but also keeps it a variety for me. Where journalism, as it fell off, I couldn't rely on it to pay my bills. So as I alluded to earlier, I likened my career to a three-legged stool where one was subject matter work for the home office market, one was journalism, and one was corporate copy. And they could all we were talking about tripods, they can all kind of give and grow and shrink a little bit, but still keep the stool up. But now, like I said, it's being able to. I know one of your questions is going to be, how do you cope? How do you instill resiliency in what it is that you do? And that's, as a freelancer, as an entrepreneur. I don't care if you're a freelancer or if you're an entrepreneur who runs a storefront or runs a business. I mean, if you're not resilient, you're in the wrong business. Go take a paycheck. 1099 has been my way since I quit that last day job. If you can't handle it, go get a W-2 and be at the whim of the man out there, as it were. It can be tough, but I look back, and as we were talking before this, raised three kids, in their late 20s and 30s. Now we have a grandchild, all raised in a home office environment. My wife was an RN and became a nurse practitioner, very supportive along the way. And I could not succeed in what I do had I not had her as the foundation of the network, to grow this, and the mindset of being an entrepreneur and just knowing what it takes, and learning along the way what it takes. You're not born an entrepreneur. I think you might have the guts for it in some ways, but it's stuff you learn along the way, and lessons good and bad. And it's been pretty remarkable. So to your point, unexpected change. It's been, they're all changes. It's how you pivot and rotate around them.
So, in the couple of minutes that we have left, you're
Sure.
facing a CEO or a CMO. The CEO is looking at what Irving Plunsker calls POA, people of age. And
Yeah.
then, what do you tell a CEO or CMO? Why hire that older guy or woman, that older person?
Did you see, what was it? The Intern? It was Robert De Niro and Anne
I didn't
Hathaway.
see it, but
Okay.
I,
It's worth seeing
I have
because
ADHD, man. I don't watch movies anymore.
yeah, you know what? I watch him. Well, the problem is I watch him at night, lying in bed with an AirPod in on my phone. I watch it until I fall asleep. Then I got to remember what I was watching last night because I fall asleep to it. I got to go back and try and find where I left off and then pick it up from there. Um, but
What
it's
do
a
you tell a
cute, it's,
CEO?
what do
It's
I tell
like,
CEO? Yeah, exactly. Bring me back in. There's an instilled knowledge. There's sort of that institutional knowledge that people of age will bring. That, no disrespect, I got three Gen X or millennials in my household, so I believe that. Well, they're not in the household. They're on their own. They're fully functioning, and all I do is pay the cell phone bills. So I've got to figure out how to get out of that one. But that's another story. Um, but look for the insights that they bring, the knowledge that they can bring. Don't dismiss, especially when you're working with somebody who's like me as a freelancer, the knowledge that you bring, and that the insights, and that, again, institutional knowledge that you have. And that's not to dismiss Gen X, Gen Y, Gen Z, whatever, because they bring a lot of freshness, that's inspiring. And I think that you just got to look at the older generation, and if they seem spot on, it's all up to you how you interview that individual. If you can bring out that spark, and some of them checked out. Some are in their, might be in their mid to late 50s, and they're just hankering for retirement. That's not who you want. You want somebody who still has that spark. I look at yourself, I look at me, and I love what I do. My wife talks about retirement. As a freelancer, give me a laptop and an internet connection. We hop in our RV and I can work from anywhere. And I love what I do, and I make choices as to what I want to do. Make sure that they're bought in. You know, it's all about how you interview that older worker. And because you'll find people who are, what is it, quiet quitting, where people in the
Yes.
pandemic, they quit. They just checked out, even though they were at their computer. You could see they were keystroking, but they ain't doing shit. You know, excuse me, but they're not engaged. They're not involved. You know, so, and there are
We
older workers who
thoroughly
might be,
enjoy swear words.
yeah, yeah, there you
I,
go.
I, I grew up in Madrid. Swear words is the way we speak.
Exactly, exactly. So I
We say
appreciate
whatever
that.
we want.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Um,
Great.
you know, so, and I think it's something to keep in mind, and just go for character. They always said, you know, talk to any CEO. They can train anybody. They can train a monkey to do anything, but they can't train them to have the right character. And that's what CEOs hire for. So, you know, a lot of kids don't have it yet, but they need to be mentored and nurtured and be willing to invest that time in nurturing the next gen. And it's fun. I've had a great time doing what I do. I still do. And I appreciate you, and I appreciate you asking the questions, and I've watched your videos, and I appreciate the folk you have on, and I'm humbled to be amid some of the people you've brought
Oh
on
yeah.
board. You know,
Absolutely not. You
it,
are
it,
one of the
it's
pioneers.
yeah, it's great. And like I said, I love it. And if you have that attitude, you know, not every day is going to be Christmas. As a friend of mine who ran sales for his family business, you know, he'd go on these long sales trips and come back, you know, shot a mulligan. It was just horrible, you know, and he will just say, not every day is Christmas, but you know, it's what we make of them. And I wake up every day. I work what I want. I do what I want. Got, again, good kids and loving wife, and we travel, and you know what? I can't ask for more than that.
When I grow up, I want to be you.
There you go. There we go. We'll trade war stories and trade hints, and we got to have a scotch sometime. It's been too long.
Yes, it's been too long. Absolutely.
Yeah,
It's one of those
absolutely.
things. Well, thank you
Yeah,
very much, Jeff. I really appreciate it. It's great catching up to you. Actually, it's fantastic. I mean, you even wrote an article about me in that age, which I will never forget. I don't have it anymore.
yeah.
It got lost in some of the moves, but I will never forget it. Thank you very much for joining us. It's been a real pleasure, and I look forward to catching up with you in real life.
Wonderful. Absolutely, Marcella. Thank you so much, and thank you for what
Thank
you do.
you. Bye bye.
Peace.